KMES English Medium Junior College welcomes its students for 15th online lecture of psychology for chapter 4, cognitive processes, for the topic perception. Students, in the previous lecture, we have studied about introduction to the cognitive processes and attention. With the following topic, meaning and definition of attention, aspect of attention. Today, in this lecture, we are going to study about the topic 4.3, perception, followed by the following subtopic. 4.3.1 Meaning and definition of perception. 4.3.2 Phenomena associated with perception. 4.3 Perception. Perception, it is the ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses. Perception, it is the way in which something is regarded and understood or interpreted. For example, imagine the following situation and try to understand the nature of perception. Situation 1. Imagine that the person is talking to you in a language which is unknown to you. For example, in China. In such a situation, as you have no past experience of Chinese language, you will not understand or perceive what exactly the person is talking. You will only sense, that is auditory sense, that a person is talking. Imagine the second situation. In the second situation, a person is talking to you in the language which is known to you. For example, in English. In such a situation, you will have past experience of English. You will understand, perceive what exactly the person is talking. From the above example, you will understand that perception is equal to sensation plus assigning meaning to a sensation based on the past experience. 4.3.1 Meaning of perception. Perception is the sensory experience of the world. It involves both recognizing environmental stimulus and action in response to these stimuli. Through the perception process, we gain information about the properties and elements of the environment that are critical to our survival. There are 5 stages of perception. They are stimulation, organization, interpretation, evaluation, memory, and recall. So, coming to the meaning of perception, in day-to-day life we can see, easily sense different objects, sound, texture, taste, color, odor, etc., to which we have paid attention. We can name them. Thus, in understanding the world around us, sensation occurs first, followed by attention, and finally interpretation of the stimuli by the brain. This process of interpretation of stimuli is known as perception. Definition of perception. Perception can be defined as the process of assigning meaning to the information received about the environment based on the past experience. Most of them define perception as the process of recognizing, being aware of, organizing, gathering and storing, and interpreting, binding to knowledge, sensory information. Perception deals with the human senses that generate signals from the environment through sight, hearing, touch, smell and taste. Thus, perception refers to the way sensory information is organized, interpreted and considered through experience. Certain characteristics of perception are: personal characteristics that affect perception include a person's attitude, personality, motives, interests, past experience and expectations. Students, in 4.3.2 we are going to study about the phenomena that are associated with perception. There are two sorts of phenomena that are associated with perception. One is top-down and bottom-up processing, and second is law of perceptual organization. Law of perceptual organization consists of many subtopics like law of proximity, law of similarity, law of continuity, law of closure, etc. So, we are going to look at both the topics in detail. Coming to the first topic of phenomena that is associated with perception, top-down processing. In top-down processing, perception begins with the most general and move toward the more specific. These perceptions are heavily influenced by our expectations and prior knowledge. Our brain applies what is known to fill the blank and anticipate what is next. So, in top-down processing, if we pay attention to each of our senses all the time, our senses would be overwhelmed. Therefore, many times our brain uses the context or general knowledge while perceiving a particular stimuli. The process is called as top-down processing. When we utilize top-down processing, our ability to understand information is influenced by the context in which it appears. There are certain disadvantages of top-down processing. It requires low participation. Second, it requires lots of knowledge. Third, it does not use specified knowledge which may be presented in the logo of the organization. But there are certain uses and applications of top-down processing. Top-down processing refers to the use of contextual information in pattern recognition. Top-down approach rely on higher authorities eager to determine larger goals. Coming to the next phenomena associated with perception, that is bottom-up processing, a more modern management technique. American Psychologists Association defines a bottom-up approach as the scientific study of human behavior in organization and the workplace. In industrial psychology and organizational psychology, it is more widely recognized study. There was a significant trend upward in the use of bottom-up management. The field of industrial and organizational psychology encourages employers to consistently value their employees and make their contribution to the company a top priority. This approach calls upper management to lessen their hold on decision-making power. Bottom-up approach is very beneficial. It is the fact that employees will feel far more involved with their organization and interested in the future success. They will feel more obligated to making process. So, bottom-up approach many times. Our perceptual experience is based entirely on the sensory stimuli and it is not influenced by any context in which it appears. In such a situation, we take in energy from the environment and convert it to the neural sign, signal, sensation, and then try to interpret it perception. This process is called bottom-up processing. Bottom-up processing is a process that starts within an incoming stimuli and works upward until a presentation of the object is formed in the brain.
Law of perceptual organization. In this chapter, we are going to study about the four laws of perceptual organization. 1. Law of proximity. 2nd. Law of similarity. 3rd. Law of continuity. 4th. Law of closure. Before coming to each of these laws, let us first understand what is law of perceptual organization. The law of perceptual organization suggests that the elements that are grouped together. It states that the user perceives objects in an environment in a way that makes the object appear as simple as possible. They see the screen as a whole instead of a collection of compounds. It is the process by which the elements of visual and other sensory information are structured into a coherent whole. So, law of perceptual organization, our brain has a tendency to recognize our sensation as a meaningful object. This was explained for the first time by a German psychologist, Max Wertheimer, in 1923 in the form of law of perceptual organization. So, some of the law of perceptual organization that we are going to study are proximity, similarity, continuity, and closure. Let's learn each of these in detail.
Law of proximity. Law of proximity describes how the human eye perceives continuation between visual elements. Elements that are close to each other are perceived to be related when compared with elements that are separate from each other. The word proximity is being close to or near. Therefore, law of proximity states that objects or shapes that are close to one another appear to form groups. Even if the shape, size and object are radically different, they will appear as a group of they are close to. So, according to law of proximity, perceptual organization, the stimulus that are near to each other are perceived together than the stimulus that are far away from each other. Look at the following example. In this figure, we perceive pairs of dots in each line. Because the dots that are near to each other are perceived together. So instead of perceiving a line of 8 dots, generally a line of 4 pair of dots is perceived. This is called as law of proximity. Coming to second law of perceptual organization, that is law of similarity. Law of similarity is the elements that are similar to each other tend to be perceived as a unified group. Similarity can refer to any number of figures including color, orientation, size, etc. The definition of a similarity is a quality or state of having something in common. So, law of similarity. According to this law of perceptual organization, the stimulus that are similar to each other are perceived together. Then the stimulus that are distinct from each other. Coming to the third law of perceptual organization, that is law of continuity. Law of continuity holds that points that are connected by straight or curving lines are seen in a way that follows the smoothest path, rather than seeing separate lines and angles are seen as belonging together. The principle of law of continuity states that elements that are arranged on a line or curve are perceived to be more related than elements not on the line or curve. Continuity, when we see an object but are compelled to move through another object when our eye naturally follows a line. So, according to this law of continuity, there is a tendency to perceive a stimulus in a continuation according to its established direction. According to this law, when two stimulus intersect, the continuation of each stimulus is perceived apparently. Coming to the last law of perceptual organization, law of closure. The law of closure refers to our tendency to complete an incomplete shape in order to rationalize the whole. The law of common phase observes that when objects pass in a same direction, we see them as related groups. The principle of closure states that when we look at the complex arrangement of a visual element, we tend to look for a single recognizable pattern. In other words, when you see an image that are having missing parts, your brain will fill in the blank and make a complete image so you can still recognize the pattern. So, according to this law of perceptual organization, there is a tendency to perceive an incomplete stimuli in a complete manner. Our brain fills up the gap in incomplete stimuli and we perceive it as a meaningful figure.